let's switch gears over to Cognos. And I am really excited to introduce Chet Phelps, the CIO at Health Solutions. Chet is a client of LPA's, but when Chet and I were chatting about this, I really appreciated him agreeing to talk today to you all other Cognos users, because I think Chet will be able to spark some ideas on how they used Cognos to make a difference during COVID in their business, and maybe it could help the rest of you folks out there. With that, Chet, ball's in your court.
Thanks, Don. Can you hear me and can you see my screen?
Yes and yes.
Fantastic. Thanks. My name is Chet Phelps. I'm the Chief Information Officer for Health Solutions. A little bit about us. Health Solutions is one of 17 nonprofit community mental health centers in the state of Colorado. We employ about 450 people locally. We provide integrated whole person care, so that would be primary care, mental health, and substance abuse treatment, to about 10,000 unique individuals across 3 different counties every year. Most of our clients have annual incomes of less than $25,000 annually, so we do serve a lot of Medicaid clients, and we've been in this line of business for over 50 years now. In February, March of 2020, like many other businesses, Health Solutions was faced with the need to send almost our entire workforce to work remotely. Some of these services that we provide are 24-hour acute care and in-home health care. So not everybody had to work from home, but probably about 80% of us did. We incurred a lot of challenges involving procuring equipment. There was sort of a mad dash on laptops, cameras, internet hotspots, cell phones, tablets. And we were doing this at the same time that everybody else was. Luckily, we had the ability and foresight to act quickly, and we bought up everything that we could. There were indeed, in some cases, bare shelves when looking for some of these devices. These were not just for our employees, but also to loan some of the equipment out to our patients who could not afford such devices. Additionally, our workforce needed to adapt to working from home, using new codes and workflows, and leadership needed to know where that was happening and where it was not happening. So today, I just wanted to share a few examples of how Cognos Analytics really made a difference for Health Solutions and how we responded to COVID-19. I want to share a few things that we learned along the way. And finally, we'll discuss how our leadership, all the way from the executive team down to the directors, managers, and supervisors, they now rely on Cognos reporting on a daily basis. And it's driving the need for even more advanced analytics. So first we needed to organize. We're not new to Cognos, although we really hit our stride in 2020 with LPA's help. As you can see, we decided to create a shared folder that focused on COVID-19 under team content. And there's a few examples of some dashboarding tools that we put into this folder that I want to explore today. Each of these dashboards were the results of concerns specified by our leadership throughout the organization. These dashboards continue to receive modification requests, and they're still used today. One of the first dashboards we had to create was for our care coordination team. They don't provide direct care, but instead they're nurses who are charged with looking at all the data behind a population of high risk and or high cost patients. And they make sure that they receive the services that they should be receiving and that all of their healthcare providers are communicating effectively between each other. First, let me say, this is probably the most ugly dashboard that we ever created, and I will take the blame for it. I created this dashboard. My staff creates beautiful dashboards. It's also, however, one of the most successful. The state of Colorado identified a population of about 2,800 unique individuals that they believed were at high risk for complications involving COVID. And our task was to reach out to a minimum of 702 of them within a period of about 30 days. So we built a data module that looked at the care coordination data from 3 different data sources. And that gave our care coordination team a near real-time picture of how many clients they had reached out to how many were still needed to hit the target, and how many additional clients were needed per day to hit that target. So by using a target date to provide a measure, we ended up calling this type of dashboard a campaign. It was very helpful in determining if we needed more or less staff working on this project. And as you can see, it's outlived its usefulness, having gone 230 plus days beyond the original due date. This is a secondary tab on the same dashboard that allowed the care coordination team's director and supervisor to see the risk score of the clients who were assigned to each of their care coordinators who had not yet received an outreach service. So the names you see here are not patients, but they are staff that are part of our care coordination team. This tab helped with caseload balancing between members of the team, as well as identification of sweet spots for successfully reaching out to these clients. It turns out that the higher the risk score, the more complex their health conditions, and consequently, the harder it is to reach them. But they are also worth more to the state of Colorado as far as behavioral health outreach. One of our BI developers created a story in Cognos to connect a series of dashboards together, showing the impact on help desk tickets after COVID. Now, this particular scene shows how many tickets were being closed in the past 30 days by technician and by issue category. Many times the story is used to make a point or illustrate a continuous thought process, but it turns out a story can also walk a viewer through multiple dashboards, just like a data player visualization control can walk a viewer through multiple items in a category on a single dashboard. You can see that the story controls at the bottom of the slide are very much like a PowerPoint presentation. If you haven't tried doing stories in Cognos Analytics yet, I highly recommend it. They're actually a lot of fun. This particular dashboard talks about average service duration for all of our departments. One of the biggest concerns that our leadership had about the impact of COVID and transitioning from a face-to-face environment for services to one that's telephonic and or televideo was the change in the duration of the service. Most services that we provide have a minimum duration that must be met before we can bill for them. Anything that falls short of a minimum duration, even if it's beneficial to the patient, is not billable. Many services are also unit-based, meaning that multiple amounts of a particular service can be billed if the duration exceeds a minimum duration. As you can see, our average service duration across the entire company fell to an all-time low of 35.6 minutes. That happened in March of 2020. It took us a week or two to adjust, and then we were able to improve this metric. Of course, we did end up changing the types of service that we provided, so we were able to bill more services in lieu of longer durations. This is the same dashboard, but we're filtered using the data player control. You can see at the top of the screen, we're looking at our substance abuse program. It has just about recovered to where it was before COVID-19. There were several contributing forces to that, including court-mandated attendance and an increase in demand for service. Not having a job or being forced to stay at home has increased anxiety, depression, domestic violence, and also substance abuse in the populations we serve. The average duration of our youth and family services was already increasing before COVID because we were rolling out a new program geared towards this population in the second half of 2020. COVID had a huge impact on this department early on, but as school season came to an end and summer began, which by the way always causes our numbers to drop for this population, we had a huge increase in the average duration of these services to these clients, which again fell off when the school started back in the fall. As you can see from the chart, they're performing just about like they were before COVID, if not a little bit better due to those new programs. As most of our services switched from being face-to-face to telephonic or televideo, we reached out to some of our vendors for grants of money or equipment to provide cell phones, smartphones, tablets to our patients who are in need. Most of these tablets were deployed to nursing homes or long-term care facilities They were kept on site and they were sterilized between uses and shared amongst multiple patients. With this dashboard, leadership could explore the telephonic data for a given month and use filters to see the impact that rolling out phones had to the overall totals. From this slide, it was easy for us to see that for that past year, over half of our revenue was coming from these types of services, being telephonic or televideo. By tracking the number of patients who were receiving their first televideo service, we were able to measure the effectiveness of our marketing campaigns, billboards, flyers, television advertising. That huge spike that you see in March is where the columns and distinct counts of patients, and of course the green line is the value of those services that were for first-time televideo patients. We also built a drill-through report that accompanied this dashboard. I won't show it because it did contain PHI, but we made that report available to staff so that we could provide mailings to these clients and thank them for trying out our new televideo services for the first time. It was decided that in order to help healthcare providers across the state adjust to teleservices, the state of Colorado loosened up the requirements for providing televideo services. This was a decision that the state could turn on or off at a moment's notice. We chose to begin tagging these services with a new type of progress note to help us identify these services quickly. That way we could react to any changes as the state made them. The first week that you see at the top of your screen was for mid-March of 2020. And as you can see, very few of these types of notes were being written by our various programs. And not every program. It turns out that our assertive community treatment team was the very first best adopter of these new types of progress notes. After pointing out this fact in regularly scheduled COVID leadership meetings and showing the Cognos dashboard to those leaders, it was easy to get other programs on board, and you can see in subsequent weeks afterward, all of our programs had begun using these types of progress notes. In many cases, the business wanted to look at what life was like before and after COVID. This dashboard compares the place of service by percentage of all services provided both before and after COVID. On the left is before, on the right is after COVID. The blue section is telehealth. And as you can see, it increased from about 10% of all of our services before COVID to about 60% afterwards. And this is true even today. One of the things we wanted to do was encourage departments to begin providing a larger percentage of their telehealth services. So our chief medical officer and our chief behavioral health officer started a monthly contest to provide a pizza party for the departments that showed the greatest increase in telehealth services month over month. And then these lunches were ordered from local pizzerias and they were delivered to the team's members at their homes. In these charts, the purple is telephonic and the orange is televideo. So the series of pie charts at the top were before COVID, and the pie charts at the bottom were after COVID, and each pie chart is a separate program or team. You can notice how our medical services, which is the fourth one from the left, close to the middle, they were already providing a lot of televideo services, and they were not impacted very much as many of their services converted to telephonic ones. This is simply another tab on that same dashboard, comparing the types of telehealth services both before and after COVID. Really easy to do. One of the features that I really liked was that if you selected various categories on a chart or graph, those are preserved when you save them. And so you can come back to that and still see the entire visualization, but with the categories that are of interest to us, in this case, televideo and video and telephone, they continue to be highlighted, which was really helpful. One thing that we found was that clinicians who did not final sign their progress notes, they result in services we simply can't bill for. And in this graph, we can see that there are $22,400 in services that still need to be signed off before we can bill for them. Most of these are from today or yesterday. You can see at the bottom, the x-axis is the age of the note Most of those are in that first column, which is 0 days old, and that makes sense. These have been a good tool for managers to show their clinicians during supervision meetings. But one day, one of our directors had a very concerning thought. And she said, with all of these workflows, what's going to happen if the clinician forgets to even enter a note for a service, let alone final sign it? Because a lot of our clinicians were used to having a receptionist or some sort of support staff person letting them know that the next patient was here. And now that we're working from home, we've completely disturbed their workflows. And she was right. In that month of March, when clinicians did not have the support staff to usher in patients to their office, and they now had to meet patients via televideo, it disturbed their workflows. Many clinicians forgot to even enter a note for a visit. By comparing our appointment data, and we removed the ones that were marked as no-shows or cancellations, we were then able to see appointments that should have had notes written for them. The large spike was from the month of March, where clinicians were first getting used to their new workflows. And the green portion of that particular spike in the middle, that was from the department belonging to the director who made the inquiry for this dashboard. Each section of the visualization included drill-through reports to show clinicians exactly which appointments should have had an appointment entered. This led to a huge recapture of data entry as well as identification of correct appointment dispositions. I'm a huge advocate, by the way, for showing the data as it is in the system so that the tool can be used for data cleanup by those who entered it. So in summary, Cognos can be a wonderful tool for monitoring change, implementing plans, and providing near real-time feedback to leadership in the organization. We utilize Cognos at the executive level, to our directors, to supervisors. The supervisors even use them with our line staff during supervision. We learned a new concept that we call a campaign, where we had a dashboard that was tuned to a specific due date for a project completion. And that allowed teams to decide on their own if more or less effort was needed to hit a target. We also learned that it was necessary to have really good rapport with department heads so that they felt comfortable to approach us with their concerns and their suspicions. And then we let the data either confirm or disprove them. Finally, we learned that changes to our business caused workflow changes, and there were things happening that we hadn't even dreamed of. So I'll open it up for questions now, Don.
Yeah, sure. And Chet, that was outstanding, and I'm sure many of our other clients have used Cognos in creative ways to measure changes in their business during COVID, and would love to hear from some of them. And hopefully you've spurred some ideas in folks on how to use them. That last example that you gave on the uncaptured notes, I saw in the top corner $582,000 worth of revenue that if people didn't enter the notes weren't going to get billed. That's not a little deal, I imagine.
No, you're right, Don. And what was worse is that we did not have any system in place to identify that was happening. So that was a real shocker for us, and we were really happy to be able to solve that problem with Cognos.
So from the time that director asked you about that till you had that report built in Cognos, I mean, how was that? A day, a week, a month? How difficult was that?
It was actually pretty easy. It was less than a week. We had all the data sources in place that we needed. We simply needed to tune a couple of data sources, build a few modules that targeted the items that she wanted to look at, and we had it up and running and being scrutinized in under a week, Don.
Wow. So from your experience, what was the hardest part of this whole exercise over the past year of using Cognos to do all the different things you've shown?
Well, Don, our IT and BI departments, we tend to do pretty well at working remotely because we do it all the time. I think the real challenge was in acquiring the devices and the technology and the licenses. not Cognos licenses, but for things like, live size and additional VPN connections. And we need to do that quickly and implement them before our ship was starting to sink. And I have to really commend our chief technology officer, who did a good job of procuring all those devices and getting them in the hands of users. There was a learning curve involved with the non-technical folks, which is really challenging because they're the folks that are generating revenue for our company.
Got it. Got it. We have a question here from the audience asking, assuming your team, uses these dashboards, or did an IT team, you and your IT team, build dashboards, or did you train individual departments to do self-service building of dashboards? What's kind of the makeup that way?
Sure. So we're kind of taking a hybrid approach. So our BI team is sort of leading the way by trying to shift the business's requests for reports to content in Cognos, where we can say, hey, here's a link to a dashboard that accomplishes what you're asking for, that you would normally receive as a static report. And so our goal is, as a BI team, to put out enough content, functionally driven areas that our users can kind of self-service their needs. And so we find that after there's enough content out there, that we need to come back in with training and help them be able to do the things that they want to do. So we're starting off by just showing them that it's possible, and then building a lot of the tools that meet their needs. And then those that really show the interest to explore the data and maybe even bring their own data to the party, which is easy to do, or take some of the data that we've already made accessible to them and allow them to tweak it to meet their needs. It's really proving pretty popular and successful for us.
Yeah, that's great. But it's a similar approach that many of our other clients are using to drive self-service. And we've actually helped several clients build like data modules that are specific to departments' needs, right? Like, just pick a different industry, a supply chain department. If you can build the right inventory type of data modules, and then you show them a dashboard and say, oh, by the way, here's how you self-serve yourself. People are thirsty for knowledge, but they don't want to learn how to build a framework model, right? So with the latest versions of Cognos, that's much easier to do. And we're finding at LPA, we're doing training every week, from half day, 1 day to multi-day, depending on what is needed. Let's see, another question. What are your future plans with Cognos at Health Solutions? So kind of what's next? I mean, it's not like COVID's totally over yet, but as the previous speakers were mentioning, with vaccinations, that I'm changing the dynamic. So what's next?
Sure. Well, our licensing has increased over time. Now includes all management staff. So we've got licenses all the way from the executive team to the directors, to the managers, the supervisors. Cognos is a reliable, useful tool. And with it, we're able to provide meaningful and actionable dashboards to help these leaders make data-informed decisions. The reports make it easy for me to procure more licenses, because all I have to do is point to the fact that there's increased need, and we know that we want our leaders making informed decisions. We're being asked now to look into predictive analytics, and we're being asked for more than just simple forecasting. We're working with LPA on a Watson Studio project that we're hoping to kick off here in the next week or two. And we've set our sights on 3 new predictive measures that we'd like to implement before the end of the year. Right now, we're looking at trying to predict the total cost of care for a given patient based on any various demographics or other trends that it can help us detect in the data. We're looking at inpatient hospitalization, which of course is an extremely high level of care. It's also very intense and expensive. It also requires careful handoff when people become discharged, that the community is there with resources to receive them. And of course, with COVID, we're really looking at substance abuse relapse, trying to find recidivism of folks that are just having a difficulty coping with COVID. So those are the three things we're planning on biting off this year, Don, and we're looking forward to LPA guiding us through that.
Yeah, thanks, Chet. Liz Herrera, who is our Director of Advanced Analytics, will be doing a presentation, after our break here, and I know she's looking forward to getting started with you on that. We have another question that just came in that says, with COVID as a business disruptor, what did you learn after COVID that can be leveraged going into the future? It's similar to the previous question, but it's related. What could be learned, or what do you attribute your success to that you're going to use going forward?
Sure. Well, it's weird. Just hearing the term that after COVID. I don't know that we're after COVID yet. I think we're still in COVID, and still continuing to adapt to business needs. I can tell you some of the things that we decided as an executive team, that the ability to work remotely, now that we've invested in all of this infrastructure, is something that we're not going to go back to the old ways completely. We've loosened up some of our policies about working from home employees. We have changed our procurement mechanisms so that when we would normally sunset old equipment like desktops and then procure new ones, we're no longer doing that. We're trying to make sure that all staff have access to laptops so that our entire workforce can work from home if and when needed. Kind of a downside, I know Texas was hit hard with winter storms weeks ago, and we got hit pretty decent last night here in Colorado. But no longer are there snow days, right? Even for some of our kids, they're working from home, they're taking classes from home. Cognos, it's really, the product speaks for itself, in my opinion. It's top-notch. There's lots of support. There's user groups. There are regular releases of bug fixes and product enhancements, increased availability of features at the license level. And it just helps to have a great partner like LPA with the experience and resources to help you across the finish line with your projects.
Chet, we really appreciate you taking the time today. Thanks for the kind words. I would like, Annie, why don't you hand it back to me, and I will put up one chart. Thanks again, Chet. And Chet, I see several of the folks on your team are attending today, so either you're going to get some good compliments from your team or some tomatoes thrown virtually, but I'm not sure. I think you did a great job.
Thank you. We'll find out shortly.
Yeah. So this brings us to the wonderful time